A sinking boat, a frantic teenager on the phone begging for a tow, 7 young people stranded at the edge of a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And buried beneath that conversation, muffled sounds that thousands of people across the internet believe contain words that were never meant to be heard. The recording was obtained through official channels. The panic in the caller's voice is unmistakable. But what may have been happening in the background while that call was being placed has fractured this case wide open. This is the story of Nolan Xavier Wells. And what you need to understand before anything else is that this 18-year-old deserved to come home. If that standard matters to you, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime. This channel exists to separate documented fact from noise, and in a case generating this much public attention, that discipline is everything. Nolan Wells grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He was a multi-sport athlete at Ocean Springs High School and had already secured a roster spot as a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He was scheduled to report back to campus on July 7th to begin training for the upcoming football season. His mother, Christine, described him as someone who could lift your confidence with just a few words and make you feel like you belonged. On the evening of July 3rd, Nolan cooked dinner for his parents, told his mother he loved her, and left to stay overnight at a friend's house. His car remained parked there. His keys stayed with it. The following morning, he would board a boat headed for Horn Island to celebrate the 4th of July with friends. That goodbye at the door was the last ordinary moment his family would ever share with him. The boat departed a private dock on El Camino Real Road in Ocean Springs at approximately 9:56 a.m. on July 4th. It reached Horn Island by 11:14. Horn Island is an uninhabited, federally protected barrier island stretching roughly 10 to 12 miles, sitting about 10 miles offshore. There are no shelters, no facilities, and no cell towers. What most people pictured when they first heard about this case was a quiet stretch of sand, a handful of boats, and a small gathering where anyone going missing would have been spotted immediately. An aerial photograph captured by a pilot flying over the island that same afternoon shattered that assumption entirely. Hundreds of boats packed the northern shoreline, dozens more anchored along the southern coast. A constant flow of watercraft moved to and from the island throughout the day. Crime scene investigator Cheryl McCollum reviewed the imagery and expressed shock that nobody in a crowd that size had come forward with a clear account of what they witnessed. That scale is critical because it means Nolan could have encountered any number of people beyond his original group, and yet to this day, no named, corroborated witness has publicly described seeing him after his friends departed. The last confirmed sighting of Nolan places him on the island around 3 in the afternoon. Chancery Court Judge Ashley Cole, the mother of Nolan's close friend Warren Hudson, stated on social media that her son last saw Nolan around that time. What transpired between roughly 3 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. is the central void this entire investigation surrounds. A video circulated on social media shortly after the disappearance, showing what appeared to be a heated confrontation among a group of young people. Many assumed it captured something directly connected to Nolan's final moments, but Trayston Shepard, a close friend of Nolan's who was present on the island, told Good Morning America that the argument in the footage was between him and his girlfriend, not involving Nolan. Law enforcement has since asked the public to submit any original unedited photos or videos from that day, specifically those depicting disturbances or believed to include Nolan. Then came the recording that ignited the national conversation. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released audio of a call placed around 4 p.m. on July 4th from a teenager aboard the boat to Seatow, a private marine towing company. NBC News had previously obtained the same recording through a formal records request. In the call, the young man sounds visibly shaken. He tells the dispatcher that their bilge pump has failed, the vessel is taking on water at the west tip of Horn Island, and he needs someone to come immediately. The dispatcher asks how far the water has risen. He struggles to answer. She requests a membership number. He cannot provide one. He identifies the account under the name Jerry, believed to be the boat owner's grandfather. When the dispatcher asks how many people are aboard, his answers shift from no children to no adults to eventually approximately 7. When asked directly whether the group requires the United States Coast Guard, his response is immediate and clear. No. The dispatcher, a woman named Vicky, transfers the call to the local tow captain and describes the situation plainly, saying it sounds like a group of kids in a panic on Horn Island. That portion of the recording is confirmed, documented, and not contested by any credible outlet. What ignited the firestorm is something else entirely. Underneath the main conversation, partially obscured by background commotion and hold music, thousands of listeners claim they can detect voices uttering phrases that, if accurate, would fundamentally alter the nature of this case. Some believe they hear someone asking whether Nolan is dead. Others interpret the sounds as someone instructing another person to check his chest. Warren Hudson has offered a different account of that background noise, stating that a member of their group was panicking and pleading with Nolan to get on the boat. None of these interpretations have been verified by a forensic audio specialist. No law enforcement agency has confirmed what those muffled sounds contain, and a well-established psychological pattern known as primed listening demonstrates that when a person is told what to hear before they listen, their brain conforms to the suggestion regardless of what the audio actually holds. That does not mean the background voices are meaningless. It means that until a qualified expert conducts proper enhancement and analysis, no honest person can state with certainty what those words are. Something else occurred during that same call that requires no interpretation whatsoever. While the teenagers were still on the line actively requesting assistance, the boat owner's grandfather called Cito independently and informed them the group no longer needed help. The boys never communicated that. They never told the dispatcher they had resolved the situation, and the grandfather was not on the island. He was not on the vessel. He was not in the water. How he determined assistance was unnecessary, and who relayed that message to him remains publicly unexplained. Now set the audio aside completely, because there is a government document in this case that carries more evidentiary weight than any disputed recording. Under a signed law enforcement authorization, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources retrieved GPS data directly from the chart plotters aboard two boats connected to the events of that afternoon. A chart plotter is a dedicated marine navigation instrument. It logs coordinates and timestamps automatically. The data cannot be altered after the fact. It cannot be selectively removed. What it captured is an uneditable record of where that vessel traveled. The boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. It did not proceed directly to port. At 5:52, it entered Fort Bayou. At 6:06, it returned briefly to the dock. It departed once more and eventually reached the Fort Bayou boat launch at 7:19 that evening, after which it was transported overland to the Biloxi residence of the boat's owners. That journey consumed nearly 3 hours. It included multiple stops and at least one unexplained change in direction. For a trip publicly characterized as a direct return home, those movements demand an accounting. As of today, no member of that friend group has provided a detailed public explanation for any segment of that route. Not the first detour, not the second departure, not the final destination change. That silence remains the most documented and least addressed element of this entire investigation. Nolan's family learned he had not returned when one of his friends called Christine at approximately 11:07 that night. She did not pick up the first time. He called again. That second conversation lasted 5 minutes. Shortly after it ended, the friend contacted the Coast Guard. The United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue organization, confirmed separately that they received communication connecting them to Christine that same evening. Multiple agencies mobilized. By morning, Christine had traveled to the island herself. She began posting desperate appeals on social media, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger discovered Nolan's body in the water along the shoreline of Horn Island. Dental records confirmed his identity. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department released a statement the same day declaring no foul play had been identified at that time. An independent autopsy was subsequently arranged by the family and conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a forensic pathologist with 2 decades of experience who serves as president of the National Medical Association. His findings, announced by attorney Ben Crump at the NOC National Convention in Chicago, classified the cause and manner of death as undetermined pending investigation. Dr. Mitchell identified red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's skull. He also noted that the body arrived without certain throat structures and internal organs, which had been removed during the state's earlier examination, limiting what the second autopsy could determine. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner stated their procedure followed standard protocols, but declined to comment on the independent findings. The official state autopsy results remain unreleased pending toxicology. Approximately 60 witnesses have been interviewed as investigators continue assembling a timeline of Nolan's final hours. The 3 friends who traveled with him on the boat have been questioned in depth. The FBI is assisting with digital evidence analysis. The district attorney has confirmed that once the investigation concludes, all evidence will be presented to a grand jury, which will determine whether charges are warranted. Evidence will remain out of public view until the grand jury completes its review. A combined reward of $125,000 funded by Reverend Al Sharpton, Tyler Perry, and Terrell Owens stands for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Warren Hudson, one of the friends who was with Nolan that day, broke his silence in an extended interview. He maintained that Nolan chose to remain on the island with a young woman he had been spending time with. He denied any involvement in Nolan's death. He denied deleting anything from Nolan's phone. He stated the device was handed over to the family the same night without resistance. Nolan's parents have pushed back firmly against the claim their son would have voluntarily separated from his group. His father Elmore said they always taught him to stay together, to return with whoever he left with, and that Nolan always agreed. A young woman referenced throughout the case only as Katie, described as the last person confirmed to have been with Nolan in the water, has reportedly been identified and spoken with investigators. Her full public account has not been released. What she observed and when she last saw Nolan could reshape the entire understood sequence of events. Here is where this case stands at this moment. A piece of audio that may contain critical background dialogue, but has never been subjected to forensic analysis. A GPS record on a signed government document showing a boat route that nobody has publicly explained. An independent autopsy that could not determine how Nolan died. A state autopsy that has not been released. 60 witness interviews feeding into a grand jury proceeding. A $125,000 reward that remains unclaimed, and a family that buried their 18-year-old son without knowing what happened to him. Nolan Xavier Wells deserved answers the day he was found. His mother said it with absolute clarity. The only question they have is what happened to their son. That question is still waiting. And until it receives an honest, evidence-driven response, this case is not closed. Not for his family, not for the investigators, and not for this channel. If you want to stay informed as each new development surfaces, subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime right now, and make sure that like button is pressed. Every piece of evidence that emerges in the weeks ahead will be examined here with the same standard you just witnessed. No shortcuts, no assumptions dressed as conclusions. Nolan's memory demands that. His family has earned it, and you deserve nothing less.